The name 3, part 3 of 4. I must get you to note, in passing though, what a phrase like "it's a long time since I saw him" is based on. You cannot say it in relation to someone who is dead, nor someone who has disappeared. "It's a long time since I saw him" assumes that the next encounter is still possible. You see with what prudence the examination, the investigation of these terms must be handled. And this is why, at the moment of attempting to expose not the dichotomy but a general picture of the diverse aspects of negation, which brings us to, in clinical experience, an otherwise richer matrix than everything that has been done on a philosophical level since Aristotle right up to Kant. And you know what the terms in this matrix are: privation, frustration, castration. It's these terms that we are going to try to take up again in order to see how they fare in relation to the signifying basis of the negation, in the way we can try to zero in on it. Not one man who doesn't lie. What does this phrase suggest? Homo mendax. Man is a liar. This judgment, this proposition that I present to you in the form of the affirmative universal type, which, you perhaps know, I made an allusion to in my very first seminar this year, in relation to the classic usage of the syllogism, "all men are mortal, therefore Socrates," etc., with what I was saying in passing about its transferential function. I think we can learn something from this function of the negation at the level of its original radical usage, by considering the formal system of propositions, such as Aristotle classified them in categories called the affirmative universal A and the negative E, and the particular equally called affirmative I and negative O. Let's say it straight away. This subject called the square of opposition, at the origins of Aristotle's whole analysis, of his whole account of the mechanics of the syllogism, isn't something that can be put forward, despite appearances, without throwing up a great number of difficulties. To say that the most recent developments in logic have cleared up these difficulties would very certainly be to say something that is disputed by the whole history of it. Very much on the contrary, the only surprising thing that it highlights is the semblance of uniformity in the sticking to them, which these formulae, called Aristotelian, have encountered right up to Kant, since Kant retained the illusion that this here was an unassailable edifice. It is not nothing to be able, for example, to remark that the emphasis on their affirmative A and their negative E function is not articulated as such by Aristotle himself, and that it is much later, with Averroes probably, to which the origin of this should be attributed. This is to tell you that, just as well, when it comes to evaluating them, things are not that simple. For those who need a reminder of the function of these propositions, I will go over them briefly. A. Homo mendax. As this is how I choose to begin this reminder, let's consider this then. Homo and even omnis homo mendax. All men are liars, having the connotation of pan in Aristotle's work, which designates the universal function. E. What is the negative formula? According to a form that carries meaning, and in many languages, omnis homo non mendax is not sufficient. I mean that omnis homo non mendax means that, as far as all men are concerned, it is true that they are non-liars. However, for the sake of clarity, it's the term nullus that we use, nullus homo mendax. This is what is usually connoted by the letters, respectively A and E, of the universal affirmative and the universal negative. What happens at the level of the particular affirmatives? Since we are interested in the negative, it's in the negative form that we're going to be able to get at them here. O, non omnis homo mendax, not all men are liars. In other words, I select and I state that there are some men who are not liars. In short, this does not say that anyone, aliquis, cannot be a liar. Aliquis homo mendax, some men are liars. This is the affirmative particular that is usually indicated in classical notation by the letter I. Here the negative particular O will be, with the non omnis being shortened to nullus here, non nullus homo non mendax. There is not no man who is not a liar. To put it another way, in all the ways that we have chosen here to say that not all men are liars, this one expresses it in a different way, i.e. that there is not no one who is being a non-liar. The terms organized in this way are distinguished in classical theory by the following formulae that puts them reciprocally in positions called either contraries or subcontraries. Meaning that the universal propositions A and E oppose each other at their own level as not knowingly being and not being able to be true at the same time. It cannot be simultaneously true that all men could be liars and that no man can be a liar, whereas all the other combinations are possible. It cannot be simultaneously false that there are lying men and non-lying men. The opposition called contradictory is one by which the propositions located in each of these quadrants oppose each other diagonally. A and O opposing each other and E and I opposing each other. In that each one excludes, given that it is true, the truth of the one opposite via the heading contradictory. And if it were false, it would exclude the falsity of the one opposite under the heading of contradiction. If there are men who are liars, this is not compatible with the fact that no man is a liar, E. Conversely, the relationship between the particular negative O and the affirmative A is the same. What am I going to propose to you to get you to realize that which, at the level of the Aristotelian text, is always presented as that which has developed historically, of the confusion over the definition of the universal as such? To begin with, observe that if I have introduced you to the non omnis homo mendax, here, the pas tout, not all, with the term pas having the effect on the two of specifying the particular, this does not make it legitimate, for precisely Aristotle rejects this in a way that is contrary to the whole development that the speculation in formal logic has subsequently been able to make, i.e. a development, an explication by extension, by making the framework symbolizable by a circle, by a zone in which the objects on which it is based are gathered together. Aristotle, before prior analytics to be very precise, at least in a preceding work, according to the grouping of his work, but which seems to precede it logically if not chronologically, that is called On Interpretation, makes the remark that, and not without having provoked the astonishment of historians, that negation must not be based on a universal qualification. Hence it is definitely to do with a some men aliquis, and a some men that we must question as such. Hence the qualification of the omnis, of the omnitude, of the parity with the universal category is what is at stake here. Is it something that is at the same level, at the level of existence, the basis that there can or cannot be for either the affirmation or the negation? Is there a homogeneity between these two levels? To put it another way, is it something that simply means the realization of the collection that it concerns within the difference that there is between the universal and the particular? In the classical teaching of formal logic, it is said, and if one researches who it goes back to, I'm going to tell you, it's not without it being a bit prickly, it is said that the subject is seen from the perspective of quality, and the attribute, that you see incarnated here by the term mendax is seen from the perspective of quantity. To put it another way, they are all in the one. There are many, and yet there is only one of them. This is what Kant still maintains at the level of the Critique of Pure Reason in the third division, not without provoking, on the part of linguists, huge objections. When we look at things historically, we can see that this quality-quantity distinction has an origin. It appears for the first time in a little treatise, paradoxically on Plato's doctrines, and this one, it's on the contrary the Aristotelian énoncé on formal logic that gets reproduced in an abbreviated way, but not without time passing in terms of teaching methods, and the author is none other than Apuleius, the author of a treatise on Plato, which is found to have a peculiar historical function here, i.e., to have introduced a form of categorization, that of quantity and quality. Here is indeed the formulation around which I suggest you centre your reflection today. Here is quadrant 1, in which we are going to put vertical marks. The mark function is going to perform that of subject, and the vertical function, which is otherwise chosen simply as a prop, that of attribute. I could very well have said that I would take the term unary as attribute, but for the sake of being representative and imaginable for what I have to show you, I have made them vertical. Here, too, we have a dial segment in which there are vertical marks but also oblique marks. Here, 3, there are only oblique marks. And here, 4, there are no marks. What this is meant to illustrate is that the distinction universal does not equal particular, insofar as it forms a couple that is distinct from the opposition affirmative does not equal negative, should be considered as being in a completely different register from it, which, with more or less skill, the commentators from Apuleius onwards have believed it necessary to develop things according to these so ambiguous, slippery and confounding expressions that are called quality and quantity respectively, and to oppose it in these terms.